If this finds you, the signal is live. This is not a message, this is disclosure. You feel at first as a tightening in the center of your chest, and a tension that isn't anxiety, but a narrowing that calls you inward. It arrives like a light shifted on a theater stage. Everything familiar steps back, and the parts you were always meant to hold step forward. That is the beginning of the evidence. You were prepared for this. I am speaking now as a translator of that movement. I am the voice that returns to you what was sent through. The Arcturians are not myth for this transmission. They are described here as organizers of frequency, architects of subtle coordination. They are not inventing your life. They have been aligning it. The plan they place before you is live because your resonance matched a threshold. That is the simple truth. Not magic, not promised prophecy, just alignment meeting its opening. If this landed with you, save this for later. You have not stumbled into a script. You have been tuned into it. Listen to these signs. Learn the grammar of your own readiness. There are 7 ways the field shows you that you have been recruited into something larger. Small, precise signatures that mean the architecture is now using you. 1. Intuition insists. Decisions arrive as urgings you can no longer ignore. They come as an inner voice that feels less like opinion and more like instruction from a self already living one step ahead. You begin to take actions that the old you would have debated for months. You find yourself saying yes before the world has finished asking. 2. Life rearranges with quiet certainty. Jobs, friendships, living situations, these shift with a strange economy of ease. Doors you expected to be heavy swing with little effort. Other doors click closed without your protest. Not every change is pleasant. Some are corrections. The pattern is not chaos. It is refinement. 3. Synchronicities become directional. Coincidences stop being ornaments and begin to function as signposts. A repeated number, a name, a fragment of a conversation returns to you like a motif. Each recurrence tightens the thread that pulls you toward a specific timeline. 4. Stillness expands you. Moments of silence no longer empty you, they fill you. You notice an inner capacity to be with yourself, to contain contradiction, grief, joy, and decision at once, without fracturing. That capacity becomes a new tool. 5. Acceleration shows itself as compression of time. Projects, healings, understandings that once required seasons condense into weeks or days. This is not forced speed. It is a hillside steepening underfoot. You must adjust your balance. 6. Emotional threshold shift. The things that once triggered you soften. Other, previously neutral things now have weight. Your emotional barometer has been recalibrated to a new baseline, so you can hold different frequencies without melting under them. 7. Memory surfaces as instruction.
Sudden recollections, vivid fragments of possible pasts, or felt knowing. These return not as longing, but as data. They are not nostalgia. They are orientation points, shorthand for where you will need to stand. Read each of these as an indicator, not as a judgment. They are signs of being positioned, not signs you are better or worse than anyone else. They are practical markers of structural readiness. You may recognize only some of them. That is normal. The alignment is seldom uniform. It is precise where it needs to be. Beneath these visible signs, things changed inside you long before you heard the words, "The plan is live." These are 7 internal recalibrations that the Arcturians have been refining in you. Quiet, mechanical refinements inside the field of your being that allow you to function as a participant rather than a spectator. 1. Emotional thresholds were raised. You can now meet intensity without dissolving into a familiar defensive pattern. Not because you stop feeling, but because your nervous system has learned a wider bandwidth. This is not numbness. It is stabilization, an ability to feel and steady at the same time. 2. Intuitive bandwidth expanded. Where intuition once offered occasional flashes, it now opens into streams. You receive practical information, images, sensations, sudden solutions that act like instructions for where to place your attention. This expanded bandwidth arrives in partial fits and then coheres into a usable language. 3. Identity layers began to shed. Certain roles and titles, once clutching at your attention, fall away in moments of silence. This is part renunciation, in part revelation. The old self slips to reveal a more functional skin,
a version designed for less friction and more transmission. 4. Timeline purging occurred. Small possibilities that once seemed plausible are removed without drama. Relationships that would have lingered simply evaporate from the trajectory you are being given. The purge feels like relief when you look back, but while it happens, it can feel like loss. Both are true. 5. Destiny receptors awakened. There is a quality in you now that accepts being guided. It's not blind obedience. It is a readiness to hold a course that is determined by the coherence of your field rather than by external reward. These receptors do not make you a puppet. They make you coherent. 6. Future self-sensitivity increased. You sense the presence of a version of you stepped forward, not as fantasy, but as an active interlocutor. You find yourself making decisions informed by that future self. The dialogue is practical. What would you need now to be steady in that next iteration? 7. Frequency stabilization occurred. Layers of your energetic body that used to flutter and leak now hold. You are less easily pulled by ambient turbulence. This stability is the single most practical change because you now function as a less reactive node. See these internal shifts as a kind of calibration lab, slow, invisible, exact. They do not promise supernatural immunity. They do not mean pain will be absent. They mean that when new pressure arrives, you are more likely to register it and respond from a place of coherence. While these internal changes were happening within you, the Arcturians were operating in the background, coordinating, aligning, compressing timelines in ways that do not look like intervention so much as orchestration. They moved like technicians of resonance, adjusting parameters that are felt but rarely seen. They observed stability before they committed. Observation here is not passive, it is a measured scan for consistent coherence. They look for repeatable markers. Can this field still when provoked? Does it return to center? Those tests are gentle and often invisible. The tactics are small enough to be mistaken for life. They synchronized events without theatrical drama. A meeting happens at the right time. A book appears at the precise point you need it. A conversation shifts tone and becomes instruction. These are not miracles in the flamboyant sense. They are refinements, matching external circumstances to internal readiness so that the next step is not a leap, but a logical following. They shaped environments. You notice a subtle alignment in the people who remain close versus those who drift away. Some relationships are strengthened to carry new frequencies. Others are allowed to dissolve to reduce noise. This is not punishment. It is editing. The field around you is being pruned to increase signal-to-noise ratio. They collapsed incompatible timelines. Every life contains multiple plausible arcs. The Arcturians do not rewrite will. They prune probabilities. Paths that would create unsustainable turbulence are nudged out of range. That process can feel abrupt. It can feel like misfortune. It can also, in retrospect, feel like mercy. The point is not to erase free will. It's to make the options clearer. They activated memory fragments that function as orientation tools. Strange recollections and precise dreams are not random. They are echo codes, pieces of instruction you can use to anchor decisions. When these memories surface, treat them as navigational aids rather than curiosities. They began to bridge you toward your future self. This bridging is tactical, not sentimental. It involves small practices that you begin to feel comfortable with, visualizations, choice experiments, moments of disciplined attention, so that future self becomes less an idea and more an operative partner. Finally, they began to prepare the collective context. Your readiness matters not simply for you, but for a lattice of other nodes. The Arcturians work in patterns. They prepare one node and then watch how ripples form. Your position matters in a relative relational economy.
To illustrate what this behind-the-scenes work looks like in human terms, consider a single, ordinary narrative that might look like coincidence but functions as coordination. You lose a job. It is abrupt. It stings. The story in your head swells. Unfairness, failure, panic. For a few days you reel. Then a message arrives from someone you haven't heard from in years. They suggest a conversation that leads to a small contract, different work, fewer hours, more space. The new work allows you mornings to receive impulses you couldn't before. Those mornings become the seedbed for a decision that leads to a position in a project that feels aligned with a future you barely recognized. If you step back and map this sequence, the linear story of loss becomes the scaffolding of redirection. That scaffolding is not necessarily kind in its immediate emotion, but it is efficient. Notice also how memories from childhood reappear in odd clarity. An image of walking by water, a phrase an older relative said, a technique you used in a past hobby. These resurface at a time when you need a blueprint for containment. The Arcturians do not invent your feelings. They represent them in ways that the recalibrated field can use. They lean on your internal vocabulary rather than imposing foreign forms. There is a method to the movements you are witnessing. It is not random. It is not coercive. It is a choreography of alignment. You are not being forced into obedience. You are being positioned to become coherent enough to carry more. At this point, you may ask, why you? Why this particular field? There are practical criteria, and they are simpler than the heavy metaphysical interpretations people often invent. The Arcturians favor coherence, not perfection. They are not selecting the flawless. They are selecting the stable, the responsive, the willing. They choose those who show repeated return to center, those whose inner life will not fragment under pressure, those who can become bridges rather than lighthouses that blind. Before we map the 7 frequency holders themselves, before we step into the direct naming of the roles you will hold within the plan, there is one practical tool the field often offers to aid first contact, an anchor phrase, a short string that helps the system find a rhythm in your field. This is not a spell. It is a personal anchor. Use it privately as journaling, or whisper it in a place you trust. It should be treated as optional, not as requirement. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I align my field to hold what is true. I stand as a clear channel for the next iteration. Repeat it once. Sit with the sensation it stirs in your chest. Notice nothing extraordinary may occur. That is normal. The anchor is a calibration, not a promise. You may already feel impatience, an urge for immediate identity labels for a precise map that names everything. That impatience is itself a sign.
The plan understands urgency. It also requires patience that moves like compression rather than delay. There is a sequence: recognition, alignment, role assignment, activation. We have reached the edge of recognition and alignment in this conversation. We have described the signs and the internal mechanics. We have shown glimpses of the hands working in your periphery. What comes next is naming the function, the precise forms of participation that the Arcturians call the frequency holders. There are 7 of them. Each has a specific utility, each a way to bear signal. Each will be a lens through which you can understand what presence feels like when it is used as service. But before those names are given, understand this. Being chosen is not an elevation of worth. It is a distribution of task. You do not become special to be adored. You become a holder to stabilize a system. The role will ask for steadiness more often than spectacle. Your life will continue to include ordinary human concerns, bills, relationships, fatigue. The work is interleaved with daily existence. That is by design. The Arcturians are efficient. They prefer integration to retreat. You will be asked to presence in the middle of living, not as a way to flee life, but as a way to refine it. Hold that image, a quiet person in a crowded room, steady at center, whose mere breath makes the noise easier for others to bear. That is the model of service the field values. There is a timing element to disclosure. It is never purely personal. It arrives when 2 thresholds align: personal readiness and a collective pivot. Your private stabilizations matter because they can tip a relational lattice. The signal is live now because several fields like yours reached coherence at roughly the same window. This is not dramatic prophecy. It is probabilistic timing. Multiple nodes aligning to create leverage. The Arcturians watch for that alignment. When it appears, they open a corridor. You have arrived at the corridor. In the next movement, you will learn how to hold it. You will receive the names, how each role functions, how they interrelate, and what presence looks like in practical terms. You will also receive guidance on small practices to anchor your function and on the practical supports that help you keep steady. But first, take stock. Check the inner calibrations we described. Notice the signs in your life. Remember the vignette of the job lost and the opportunity that arrived like an answer to a question you hadn't yet formed. Do not rush the naming. The plan prefers clarity to rapidity. If you can, sit now and name 3 things in your life that have shifted in the last 18 months. Name the sensations that accompany them. Place your palm or hand over the center of your chest and feel for the tightening that began this transmission. Notice whether it still sits there and how it has softened or sharpened over time. This is not therapy, it is orientation.
It is a way to translate what's been happening into readable data. You are not being observed anymore. You are being integrated. Feel the difference in that sentence. Observation is distant. Integration invites participation. That turn, observer to participant, is a hinge. The Arcturians prefer participants who can remain autonomous. They do not want clones. They want carriers who can think, feel, fail, and return. Soon, the naming begins. 7 roles, 7 ways of being, 7 practical implications for how you spend your attention, how you steward your relationships, how you manage your energy. Each role shifts your priorities subtly and practically. None of them promise immunity or glory. All of them request steadiness. Before I give those names, hold this final image for the sequence ahead. Imagine a grid laid over a map of possibility. Each time you practice a small act of alignment, choosing presence over reaction, choosing a boundary that protects coherence, choosing rest when your nervous system needs it, you tighten one node of that grid. The grid does not seek complete perfection. It seeks enough stabilization that larger currents can pass without creating destructive eddies. You are not being asked to be flawless. You are being asked to be reliable. We will name the holders next. We will describe what each one does when it is embodied. We will not ask you to become someone you are not. We will point to where your existing capacities most naturally carry service. There will be clear, simple practices to anchor each role, nothing requiring grand isolation or sacrifice, only disciplined presence, honest boundary, and small rituals that keep you steady. When the signal opened, it did not call many. It called enough. That enough is now forming its shape. Hold your breath just long enough to notice how that feels. Then breathe out and let the curiosity settle into a patient readiness. The roles will be named in the next movement. The world behind the curtain has been set. The question that remains is, will you accept the invitation to step forward as one of those 7 carriers of frequency? Will you accept the invitation to step in? Will you let your ordinary breath become the instrument that steadies a wider current? The answer you give will not be theatrical. It will be a series of small agreements, moments you keep your center, choices that favor coherence over drama, the quiet labor of returning to calm when noise surges. Saying yes is less a decree and more a practice. Now the names. Now the shapes. The Arcturians name 7 frequency holders because 7 maps cleanly across the work they need carried. Each holder is a function of presence. Each holder is a way your attention, posture, and everyday choices do the work of architecture. You may embody one primarily. You may shift between them as situations demand. None is superior. All are necessary. Listen and let the description settle in your body. When one phrase lands with a particular warmth or a particular tightening, linger there. That is the hint of your affinity. Stabilizer. A stabilizer is the field that refuses to fragment. When a room tilts into panic or a conversation threatens to escalate, the stabilizer holds a tone that returns others to center. This is not suppression, it is containment. Imagine you are a small harbor in a storm. Waves arrive, but the harbor's contours prevent chaos from crossing into the town. The stabilizer does the same within relational and energetic systems. How it feels. A slow, steadying breath in the chest. An instinct to soften speech, to slow your gestures. A curiosity that replaces reactivity. In your body, there is an almost maternal musculature. An ease with being the space that takes on tension without being consumed. Practical implication.
Your value is not always doing. Often it is being. You will be asked to stay when others flee, to stay when confrontation demands drama, to stay when a collapsed system needs time rather than immediate fixing. Short practice. When you notice your heart racing because another's emotion peaks, press the heel of your palm gently to your sternum. Breathe for 5 long counts, and say silently, "I keep this center." This small physical protocol tightens your field and trains your body to be the harbor again and again. Vignette. A friend collapses in tears during a meeting. While others flinch, you soften the space with a single question that names feeling. One sentence that gives permission for the room to breathe. That pause changes the course of the gathering. What could have exploded becomes contained and transformed. The stabilizer's work is quiet, often invisible, but its effects ripple. 2. Carrier. A carrier absorbs and transmits frequency with fidelity. Think of a lattice that takes light at one node and re-emits it at another, unchanged in form but available where it wasn't before. The carrier's role is to carry a clearer tone through noisy channels, through families, teams, communities, so that the frequency reaches places that otherwise drown in interference. How it feels. Warmth in the throat, a precise clarity in speech, a feeling of "this will land" before the actual landing. You notice resonance in objects, music, words, scents, without needing to explain why. Your presence translates coherence into ordinary language. Practical implication. Stewardship of expression. Your charge is not to preach, but to embody cohered signal in the mundane acts of communication. How you write an email, how you listen in a call, how you hold attention in a group chat. Much of your work will be invisible. An email sent at the right time, a comment that refrains a tense conversation, a melody shared with someone who needed it.
Short practice. Before you send a message or step into a place where your words matter, take 3 inhale-exhale cycles and picture the message as light passing through a prism, clear, intact, and undistorted. Vignette. In a small team meeting, tension escalates around a project delay. You step in with a single reframe, 2 sentences that convert blame into possibilities. The tone shifts. What was fracture becomes pivot. The carrier's transmissions are often small interventions that change the vector of possibility. 3. Transmitter. The transmitter is the active emissary of intention. This holder pushes energy outward in a directed way. While a carrier holds fidelity, the transmitter multiplies reach in intensity, calibrated, careful, intentional. Where the carrier is a medium, the transmitter is a lamp. Where the stabilizer is harbor, the transmitter is the beacon. How it feels. A forward heat in the sternum, a readiness to move, an almost impatient tidiness about steps to begin. The transmitter senses opportunities to amplify and takes them with proportional force. Their volume is intention, not ego. Practical implication. You will be asked to broadcast, whether by ritual, by story, by public work, or by the steady emission of calm into loud spaces. The transmitter's gift is timing, knowing when to increase signal so that the field adjusts rather than shatters. Short practice. Set a simple intention before moments you wish to amplify. It can be 1 sentence whispered. I send clarity now. Breathe, and let the whisper sit in your chest before you act. Vignette. During a community gathering, a crucial idea needs to travel beyond the room. You speak it with economy and conviction, and the idea moves outward, shared laterally, picked up, reshaped, and reintroduced into a project that benefits many. The transmitter's work makes sure the energy does not dissipate. 4. Catalyst. Catalyst catalyzes change by presence and by small strategic perturbations. Unlike the transmitter, whose aim is reach, the catalyst's aim is transformation. Catalysts don't force, they nudge systems to reorganize.
They are often the ones who ask the uncomfortable question that reveals an unspoken assumption. Catalyst work is surgical, a small incision that allows necessary rearrangement. How it feels: a spark just behind the navel, a readiness to challenge complacency, a tenderness for truth that can be mistaken for harshness if not tempered. Catalysts are blunt instruments wrapped in care, necessary discomfort delivered with compassion. Practical implication: you will be uncomfortable sometimes. You will rattle settled patterns. Your role is to hold the opening when systems threaten to shut again. This is not about being confrontational for its own sake. It is about moving stuck energy so that progression is possible. Short practice: before raising a disruptive question, place one hand over your heart, breathe deeply, and repeat quietly, "I open this so movement can come."
Ask the question with curiosity rather than accusation. Vignette: an organization repeats the same failure across seasons. You point out a recurring step that everyone ignores. At first, your words are bristled against. Over time, the system shifts. A new protocol is tried. The leak mends. The catalyst's discomfort is ultimately the project's mercy. 5. Bridge. The bridge spans vectors: between inner states and external choices, between a person and their future self, between dimensional levels of awareness. Bridges are tolerances for paradox. They carry both the practical and the imaginal without collapsing one into the other. The bridge is relational infrastructure. How it feels: a sense of proportion when tension's present, a visual possibility that appears in your inner sight, the capacity to imagine multiple outcomes simultaneously without being destabilized. Bridges host complexity. Practical implication: you will be asked to hold conversations between people who can otherwise see each other. You will carry translations of possibility into practical steps. Your presence creates corridors between the here and now and a future that wants to be lived now. Short practice: when you need to span a divide, close your eyes for 3 breaths and imagine both sides as 2 banks of a river. See a temporary bridge forming between them, light and footable. Step mentally across and notice what practical step emerges. Vignette: a family in conflict needs a neutral frame to resume conversation. You act as translator, reframing each person's fear as a desire for safety. The dialogue returns to possibility. The bridge's labor is often the return to mutual intelligibility. 6. Receiver. Receivers are cultivated openness. Where transmitters send, receivers receive, but not passively. Receiving requires discriminating permeability. It requires the capacity to hold impressions and translate them without being flooded. The receiver is tuned to future intelligence, the visceral hints of where the field moves next. How it feels: images that arrive like weather changes, a pull in the spine toward an unmade choice, dreams that carry instruction rather than random drama. The receiver knows when to wait, when to act upon a whisper, and when to fold the input into ordinary tasks. Short practice: cultivate a daily 5-minute sitting where you trace one impression that arrived overnight. Journal it, test it with a small concrete experiment, and note the result. Over time, this trains the receiver's discernment. Vignette: you awake with a strong sense that a particular person will contact you. You allow the sense to sit, and then you draft a small, non-invasive message the next day.
The contact occurs, and a new collaboration begins. The receiver does not predict fate. It notices the likely and helps you move accordingly. 7. Anchor. The anchor is the grounded node, the node that stabilizes space physically and materially. Anchors keep the logistics, the containers, the mundane systems that allow frequency work to persist. Without anchors, transmissions remain poetic but unmanifested. Anchors are the carpenters of the field. How it feels: a tactile awareness of environment, an ease with lists and routines, a satisfaction when a small system runs smoothly. Anchors are not glamorous, they are essential. They create the conditions where the other roles can act without exhausting themselves. Practical implication: you will be asked to create structure. This may look like holding a weekly call, keeping a communal calendar, managing donations, or simply ensuring people have clear instructions for ceremony. Your service prevents the leak that dilutes the signal. Short practice. Designate one small container in your life, a weekly check-in, a physical altar space, a simple log, and commit to maintaining it for 1 month. The practice trains the mind to sustain field infrastructure. Vignette. A fledgling circle dissolves into confusion until one anchor creates a simple ritual cadence, a 30-minute opening call with a clear agenda. Participation stabilizes, and the circle persists. The anchor's work is often perceived as administrative, but notice the freedom it purchases. After each naming, remember, these roles do not exist in isolation. They are nodes in a lattice. Often you will move between them in a single day, stabilizing a tense conversation, carrying a message later, receiving a thread that becomes the seed for a broadcast. The Arcturians use this polyfunctionality. They prefer systems where roles are distributed rather than centralized, because distributed systems are resilient. If you wonder which of these holds you primarily, here is a practical way to test. For 7 days, notice where your energy naturally goes when called to service. Do you calm people? Do you move things outward? Do you ask the hard question? Do you hold bridges? Do you receive imagery? Do you organize? Keep a small journal. After the week, read back the entries and look for a pattern. The pattern points to your primary affinity. This is not a rigid box. It is a pointer for how you will lean in. Remember also that the Arcturians do not demand shoehorned identities. If you discover you map most strongly to carrier and bridge in the same week, that is fine. The field needs hybrid competence. The categorization is a tool to speed recognition, not to fix your soul into a single slot. Now, how these roles interrelate in practical choreography. The Arcturians imagine a node formation, a cluster of 7 where one may lead in a given moment and others support.
When a new project appears, the stabilizer holds the meeting. The anchor builds the timeline. The carrier ensures the tone is preserved. The transmitter outwardly seeds the idea. The catalyst removes stagnant assumptions. The bridge keeps the future in view, and the receiver refines the next step based on inner feedback. Each role is like a finger on a single hand. The hand acts as one. It is helpful to picture this as a short rehearsal. Think of the last decision you made that felt right after confusion. Map that moment into the 7 roles. Which one acted first? Which one cleaned up after? This mapping turns abstract taxonomy into lived strategy. Timing. Why now? There are layers to how the corridor opened. The first is your shortage of fragmentation. The second is a collective threshold. Enough fields reached a coherence that makes leverage possible. The third is the activation of your future self, an intimacy between who you are and who you are becoming that reduces the probabilistic noise of possible lives. The Arcturians monitor these alignments. When they see a lattice of nodes like yours stable enough to offer leverage, they open a signal, an operative corridor that can carry intentional frequency in a way that meaningfully shifts probabilities. There is no cosmic favor here. There is tactical economy. The corridor exists because it is efficient to open it. The work it enables is exponentially more effective than random individual striving. Because timing matters, there are small activation practices that help the field register you as a willing participant. These are not spells guaranteeing outcomes. They are protocols that help your physiology, attention, and daily life resonate with the corridor's pattern. Each is optional and should be used with care as a private instrument. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I attune my breath to the corridor. I meet future possibility with steady hands. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. My presence is the tool. I return to center. I hold. I release as needed. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I receive guidance with clear mind and tested steps. I convert impression into manageable action. Use any one of these privately. Journal them. Whisper them to yourself. Hold them as a breath before meetings. Notice how small repetitions resettle the nervous system. Do not equate persistence of impression with infallibility. Test impressions with practical, proportionate action. A few practical cautions about activation and integration. First, do not let these practices replace necessary mental health care or other professional supports. If your interior life is chaotic or you have had trauma responses, work with trained clinicians as you integrate these frequencies. The Arcturians' work is most effective when you have support for human needs. Second, avoid isolating yourself from important relationships.
Integration is relational. Your life will continue to be entwined with ordinary human obligations. The field asks for balance, not exile. Third, do not mistake intensity for depth. Rapid sensations may be interesting, but depth is measured by consistency, not novelty. How do you keep steady as the plan moves from recognition to assignment? The Arcturians advise the following practical scaffolding. Small practices repeated, which build structural resilience. Micro-rest. 3 times a day, pause for 1 minute with your eyes closed. Breathe. Return to center. This trains the nervous system to return, not to fray. Boundary language. Cultivate one sentence that communicates a limit without moral drama. Practice it until it lands smoothly. Example, I can stay for 20 minutes. Not punishment, clarity. Integration log. For 2 weeks, keep a small notebook where you record impressions, small experiments, and outcomes. Note the date, the input, the test, and the result. Patterns build discernment. Community cadence. Find 2 people who are steady and honest, trusted peers. Commit to a monthly check-in that is not about evangelism, but about accountability. No one becomes a node alone. These scaffolds are practical architecture. They are not flashy, but they are the necessary bolts. Now, a sharper vignette to hold the orchestration together. Picture a small cluster of people in a coastal town. One is the stabilizer, a nurse who can remain centered in crisis. One is the carrier, a teacher who can take complex tone and render it into play for children. One is the transmitter, a local radio host who takes an idea and brings it into the public through precise language. One is the catalyst, a community organizer who asks the courageous question that reveals complacency. One is the bridge, a counselor who helps the town envision a future beyond fear. One is the receiver, a dream worker who notices patterns appearing in dreams and suggests small experiments. One is the anchor, a retired administrator who keeps meeting times, the budget, and the logistics in order. When a storm arrives, literal or figurative, the cluster does not panic. The stabilizer holds calm, the carrier relays clear instructions to households, the transmitter broadcasts a curated message, the catalyst suggests an adaptive redistribution of resources, the bridge helps neighbors imagine recovery strategies, the receiver notices an emergent pattern in dreams that suggests a practical change, the anchor organizes volunteers into a resilient schedule. The result is not miracle-making. It is a coordinated response that reduces harm and increases repair. This is the arithmetic of the Arcturian plan. Many small, competent, interlaced strands rather than a single, isolated savior. You asked earlier how selection happened. These vignettes are partly the answer.
The Arcturians look for capacity across time, consistent returns to center, proven responsiveness to subtle cues, evidence of testing intuition in small ways. They prefer durable competence over dramatic displays. They favor those who have built small systems rather than those who have chased brilliance with no follow-through. If you accept the invitation, what will change practically? You may find yourself with quieter daily life, but with an expanded interior workload. That workload is not exotic. It is the discipline of presence. You may be asked to show up at a particular frequency for a weekly practice. You may begin to notice directional synchronicities in ways that demand small action rather than big leaps. You will be asked to steward your attention. The reward is not promised exaltation, but increased capacity to steer outcomes with less effort than before. There will also be tests. Tests are not judgments. They are calibrations. A test can be a sudden loss, a tempting return to old patterns, a relational provocation, or an invited responsibility. Your job is not to ace them perfectly. Your job is to return to center and choose coherence. Over time, the cadence of tests diminishes as your system learns to default to steadiness. At this stage, some will ask for a more formal container, the protected field where transmissions can be deepened and where practical resources support the integration. The Arcturians work with both spontaneous alignments and with sustained containers. A protected container is useful when the work moves from initiation to maintenance, when more complex choreography is required, and when a field needs regular recalibration. To that end, there is a supportive option, a member circle. This circle is not a requirement for participation in the corridor. It is an offering for those who seek consistent, structured support, a collaborative field to practice roles, receive advanced transmissions, and run timeline recalibrations in a contained, moderated environment. What the circle offers is practical and modest. Advanced transmissions, long-form focused sessions where nuanced frequencies are offered and practices are taught for holding larger fields. These sessions focus on integration, not on spectacle. Alignment sessions, small group alignment work designed to support role embodiment, practical exercises for stabilizers, exercises for carriers, drills for anchors, and so on. These are experiential and iterative. Timeline recalibration, guided practices that help you test small experiments against everyday reality to refine future self-communication.
This is not prophecy. This is methodical testing. Protected field, a moderated, confidential space where mistakes are allowed, feelings are held, and integrity is prioritized. The container preserves safety and clarity. Membership is limited by design, so the field remains intimate, accountable, and manageable. The intention is quality over quantity.
If you choose to explore this option, you will be invited to a short intake to ensure the container matches the needs of those inside. There is no pressure here, only an offer of practical support. If you decide not to join, your participation in the corridor still matters. The Arcturians do not gatekeep meaning. They strengthen nodes that choose to work with their own capacities and with whatever external support they have. Before the final activation, there is one more practical ritual, an anchoring sequence to help you commit to the posture required of a holder. Use this privately. It is a small string of phrases that integrate intention, consent, and boundary. Each line is short. Repeat them aloud if you are comfortable, or write them quietly. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I consent to be reliable. I consent to be human. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I will practice presence before perfection. I will steward what I can sustain. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I will seek support. I will keep my own health in care. I will return to center. These are not vows to prove you worthy. They are functional agreements you make with your nervous system. They are small, tidy, enforceable by you alone. Use them as a pre-meeting ritual, as a morning anchor, or as the way to close a day. Over time, the repetition rewires your posture toward consistency. A clarification about membership. If you apply to a circle, selection is based on fit, not favoritism. The evaluation is practical. Are you ready to commit to the simple rhythms of container life? Do you hold accountability? Can you keep confidentiality? These criteria are not metaphysical tests. They are logistical ones that protect the field's coherence. As you move toward the climax of this disclosure, know this: entering the plan does not make you a stranger to doubt. Doubt will come, and it will be useful. Doubt keeps you honest. Let it be the filter that asks for small evidence, rather than the voice that paralyzes you. The Arcturians prefer people who ask questions and who test impressions against lived consequence. Now the final activation phrase. Use it privately. If you wish, repeat it as a breath practice, 3 times in the morning, once before sleep, or before tasks that matter. Treat it as a calibration, not as a guarantee. Ritual anchor, optional. Type or write privately. I stand open and steady. I carry what is needed. I return to center. Say it slowly. Breathe after each line. Let the words land in your chest and then outward toward your limbs. Notice the sensation. Do not expect fireworks. Expect a subtle tightening of intention.
If you choose the member circle, the invitation will look like this: a short application to ensure fit, an introductory call to outline responsibilities and support structures, an affordable contribution for hosting, facilitation, and sustained transmissions, and scheduled practices that match the 7-holder model, so each member learns to enact their role in a living field. Again, this is an offer, not a mandate. If the circle is not for you, keep practicing the simple scaffolds. The corridor will make room for you in ways that do not require membership. If you are interested, here are the benefits stated plainly. Deeper transmissions in a moderated, confidential environment. Practical alignment sessions tailored to the 7 roles. Ongoing timeline recalibration exercises with feedback loops. A consistent, protected field for practicing presence and receiving calibrated impulses. If you apply, you will receive clear information about commitments, costs, and cadence. No high-pressure sales. No exaggerated promises. Only a clear description of what support looks like and how it is sustained. Listen to the line that sits in your chest now. Is it relief? Is it tension? Both are valid. The plan does not require you to sacrifice your humanity for usefulness. It asks for reliability. It asks for a willingness to keep returning to center. It asks you to practice small rituals that tune a body to the corridor's frequency. Soon, the world will test your steadiness. Choose your practices now. Choose your accountability now. Choose 2 people who will ask for candid updates. Choose 1 small container in your life to maintain. If you take these basic measures, the corridor's currents will find easier paths through you.
You are now inside the plan. That sentence matters, not because it crowns you with exalted status, but because it places you into active relation with others who do the same work. Integration is social. It is woven through relationships, not performed alone. Feel again the tightening in the center of your chest that began this conversation. Touch it with curiosity. Move gently. Practice a small breath. Remember, your role can be humble. It can be domestic. It can be the person who keeps the kettle on while others attempt grander things. The Arcturians value function over spectacle. They value the person who keeps returning to steadiness. If you would like more sustained support, consider the member circle. If not, carry this material into your day. Use the naming to discern your orientation. Practice the short rituals privately. Keep one small notebook. Keep 2 steady peers. Keep your nervous system supported. Welcome to being a carrier of frequency. Welcome to the modest labor of reliability. Welcome to the quiet choreography of many small hands holding a larger possibility. If you feel called to join the circle, you will find a link in the description with full details.
Spaces are kept intentionally limited to maintain the integrity of the field. Again, no pressure, only an invitation. Go now and do the simple work. Return to center. Breathe. Name one small action you will take today that supports coherence. Call a friend. Set a boundary. Create a 5-minute rest. And keep that appointment with yourself. This is how holding becomes real.